familiar faces, so I won't say much about me because many people we know each other personally. My name is Francesco Degl'Innocenti. I'm an editor at Volume, the research architecture magazine based in Amsterdam, and I'm an architect myself, running away from the profession or the conventional ways to practice. And today we're basically hosting this very interesting panel, which features three different perspectives on the topic of the biennial. So I think actually I won't say much every time introducing the speakers because I think their presentation will have the power to explain and make us want to ask questions after. After the three presentations, we will have the possibility to ask a question and to have a conversation altogether. And actually also to find a red thread that connects three different ways to interpret the topic of the biennial of this year. Again, to them I said literally one word, and I'm not good at it. So I will simply say that the Facto is made of Floor and Jorie. Floor is a graphic designer by training, and Jorie is instead a political scientist and a journalist. And they share a very interesting, they share basically their interest about micronations and contested. So without saying much.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody, and thank you for inviting us. We are very happy to be here in this beautiful town of Timisoara. As Francesco already said, we are Floor Koomen. She's a graphic designer from Amsterdam. I'm Jorie Horsthuis, a journalist and political scientist, and we work on this website for a couple of years now. It's called Facto. It's a platform about unrecognized states, contested territories, and micronations. And I guess we're invited for the last part, the micronations part, because we've been studying this for many years. And we built quite a huge collection on our website. And now, of course, the question is, what is a micronation? We figured out actually there's 5 different types, and Floor will tell us more about it.
Yeah, it's roughly, of course, many more subcategories, but the types that we found were, for instance, like little kingdoms, adventurous people that declare themselves emperor, and just convert the local people, put a throne on their head or a crown on their head, and say they were king. These micronations usually ceased to exist when the person died who invented the micronation. Then we have the more like protest-based micronations, like Sealand, which started as a pirate station in the North Sea, just out of the territorial waters of England. And of course there's the libertarian version of the micronation. This one is founded by, it's Nederlands, it's founded by right-wing libertarian Piet Delka. And he claimed the no man's land between Croatia and Serbia. It's just like a small island in the stream. But he has big plans, so he really wants to break away from the established structures of politics. So he's also into Bitcoin. You can buy your own citizenship via Bitcoin. And he even wants, he asked the architect of Zaha Hadid to create this micronation in the metaverse. So this is also a virtual micronation being. Then you have the more like funny ones, you could say. This started from the bedroom, as it's also known, these micronations. So it's like an idea from one person who thought, hey, this is funny, I'm going to start my own country, draw my own country. But when the internet came up, these micronations actually gathered quite a lot of citizens. They created an online community which made them much bigger than usually the tenants. And this is the American Empire, making the world a stranger place. And of course you have the more conceptual micronations, like the ones we also see here on the biennial. This is a project from two Swedish artists, it's Albaland and Vargaland, and they claim actually all the land between borders. So it's really an idea, and they even claim the space in your head. So this is questioning all existing borders by this. So this is a short overview. I will go a bit deeper into one particular micronation later. And I'll hand over the mic again to Jorie.
So where does our interest come from? Well, for us it's all about borders and about representation. If you look at the Earth from above, there are no borders, right? It's just one globe. So borders are created by humans. And mostly it's a way to differentiate yourself from the other being most of the time your neighbors, that are actually not that different from you than you would say. And as a journalist, I am fascinated by this ambiguity of borders, because many borders are much more blurred than we would say, and also they show that these borders are quite fixed, but in reality there is a lot of dispute about many of these borders. According to the UN, the United Nations, there are 193 states on Earth. But what exactly makes a state? What would you say? When are you considered a state?
Control of violence.
Sorry?
The control of violence.
Control of violence, yes. Is that enough?
No, but
One characteristic. Yeah? Someone else? What Exactly. I think that's one of the main issues here. You have to be recognized by others. You can have a community, you can have a president, you can have your own coin, but still, if you're not recognized by the other states, you have a big problem. Let me see. Okay, so just to give an example of this blurred borders, at this very moment there is a referendum in eastern Ukraine, the Donbass region. People who are living in Donetsk and Luhansk have to go to the polling station to vote for independence, and in Western media this is considered a farce. Right? We don't recognize these independent states, but for the people who live there, it is real. They really have to go and vote. And this, for me as a journalist, is something that really fascinates me. I wanted to show you a video clip that was made, I think, about 1 month ago in August. It's from the border between India and Pakistan, and there they use rituals and military display to really demarcate the border between those two countries. Floor, can you... outside spectator, we see two, let's say, they call themselves enemies, but actually they look quite similar. And it's almost like a show. But on a deeper layer, of course, the people who live in the vicinity of these kind of borders really encounter a lot of problems and struggles and daily dilemmas. And that's also, I guess, where my interest started as a student, a political science student. I went to Kosovo to study the Serbs that suddenly became a minority after the war in 1999. So without moving from their house, they started to live in a country that was not theirs anymore. The common language was not Serbian anymore, but Albanian. And the people who live there, they have to deal with this new situation. And here you can see a picture just from last month. There are still a lot of skirmishes at the border and a lot of nationalism. And what I find interesting is the thing that you don't see. So behind the news of all this, I met many Serbs that almost like in the shadows have to cooperate with their neighbors, being it Albanians, in order to survive. And this is something that normally you don't see in regular news media, because this is not really spectacular, but this is also happening in many countries, like Kosovo, that in the end people cooperate with each other and try to find a way to survive. And the last example that I want to give is Nagorno-Karabakh. Does anyone recognize this picture? You know what's happening here? No? Okay. Nagorno-Karabakh is a country, unrecognized country in the Caucasus. It's officially recognized as a territory by Azerbaijan, but it's occupied by Armenian forces. And people who live there are really living in an isolated place where there's a president that is unrecognized by any other state. They are surrounded by military. There has been a war, I think, about 1 year ago. But people live there and they have to deal with their situation. Especially young people want to leave because this is really not a nice place to stay. But the Armenians, of course, don't want this land to be deserted by the youngsters. So what one expat Armenian decided to do is to invite people to marry. And he promised $250 and a cow to every couple. And he organized a mass wedding. And this happened in 2008, and I visited these couples for a large piece in Dutch magazine. And actually, their story is really not that romantic as you would guess by looking at this picture. So my main interest is like what's behind the facade of these borders. And this is also what we do as de facto. We explore these regions and these borders, the micronations, and we expose how these places put themselves on the map.
Yes, and this is also where I come in, because sometimes that's done quite literally, because a lot of these unrecognized states and micronations and even contested borders, they profile themselves via graphic design, and this is truly my interest, because this representation tells so much. It now looks very big, but of course this is a very small piece of paper. And I have a collection of these stems and a collection of stems from micronations. One of them I will highlight just a bit later, but I wanted to show you a bit of the range of subjects they discuss and also how they do this, how they claim land. This is, for instance, a stamp from Transnistria. It's an unrecognized state next to Moldova. Here you see it, and for me it's already interesting that they have this in English. So the audience they go for is an international audience, and you can see some state symbols. But these maps are, you can't even read it. It's like this little small red snake. But the most interesting stamp I find this one, which is how they position themselves in the context of Europe. And Transnistria is even so small, it's disappeared on this map. But still, that's what they do. Another example is this stamp from Pakistan. And it talks about the same place that was shown in the video earlier. It's Jammu and Kashmir, the disputed area between India and Pakistan. And on this stamp it literally says that the final status of this area is not yet determined, which is still the case. So that makes this, for me, quite an interesting stamp. And you can still see that what's now Bangladesh was then East Pakistan. But today I will talk a bit further about this stamp. You can also see the flag hanging here, which I really find a nice sort of match. And it's a stamp from a micronation, and it's from the nation of celestial space. And this nation is quite special. It was founded by this guy. His name is James Mangan, and he was born in Chicago, and he was really an entrepreneur. He self-published books about publicity. He was a publicity man. He worked for a coin factory as PR man. And what he did is that he filed a claim of all of outer space. That was his micronation. So there was no physical land, it was just like the space between, everything above the Earth, you could say. And so no planets were involved, just space itself. And how he did that, he went to the Office of Deeds and Contracts, and he signed it up. And he sent out a letter to the United Nations, to 74 states which were part of that at that time. And he asked for recognition, like what you just said, asked for recognition, which was denied. But he didn't care, he just went on. And you see, this was in 1984. And here we see him. I really love this image. You can see that he is also a visionary. Because one of the reasons why he wanted to claim this space is he already foresaw this race for space, which later would happen. That he didn't want any other country to have a sort of dominant presence in space. The moon was still like unknown territory at that time. There were, the first rockets went up. Some nuclear testing was also done in space. And he would protest when Russia set up the rockets. He would write a letter to the embassy and say, hey, this is my country, you can't do that. But of course, no one took him serious, but still, I think this peaceful ideology he had is really something, that made it special. But to go back to this stamp, it's in the colors of space, blue, and it's worth 100 ergs. So the currency is done in energy rather than in, like the currency we know, like gold or silver or coins. And it's valid only in outer space, so no good on Earth. And the flag of Celestia is also shown on the map, or on the stamp, sorry. We see it here. It's an inverted hashtag. And of course, the hashtag we know today, we use it to, to search images and to compile messages on social media. And it was first used like that on Twitter in 2007, but this symbol, of course, dates way earlier. Let's go way back. And it's a sort of abbreviation. We know it as a pound sign, and it dates back to the Romans. But what is it doing on this flag? Well, then we have to go to this guy. He was a friend of James Mangan. He's an American calligrapher. His name is Raymond de Bol. And he did all the publicity for the Nation of Celestial Space. So James Mangan, of course, being from the PR, he understood how important design was to sort of show your nation. And he also really saw calligraphy as a very special treat. sort of human keepsakes, he called it. And this is the work from Raymond at the Ball. He made a passport to the moon for Celestia. And at that time they also thought it would take 5 years to go to the moon and back. So they didn't know it could be much quicker. And James Magnan also sent this to Neil Armstrong, etc., just to spark up some more publicity. And Raymond de Bol also designed this. It's a kind of State of the Union for the nation of celestial space. And it's beautiful. And here we see this hashtag again. And here it is, the flag of Celestia. And he explains it himself, what this symbol means for him. Because he says, on a white circle in the field of blue, azure blue, the ancient proofreader's printer's mark for space is imposed on black. White and blue are the natural colors of space. So, what we see here is the proofreader's mark of space. So, when you used to have like text and would correct it by hand, and the space was missing, like the literal space for the keyboard, you would add this hashtag. So, I think James Magnan, of course, he knew this, coming from the world of publishing. So I think it's quite nice that he used this symbol of space, and it's very appropriate. And I think it's also very nice to have this story to see how micronations can also be, they can claim something, but they can also protect something. And this is one of the things that he did. So yeah, I was happy to share this story with you. And I was also happy to make all of these stamps for all the micronations which are here. And it was like an honor to design these, because it's in a way a great tradition, this making stamps for micronations.
Yeah, so we come to the end of our talk. We would really like to invite you to have a look at our website and find out if there's any micronation that is, according to you, missing maybe. Of course, we also hope to integrate some of these ones on our website, see if they are as sustainable as we might hope. And yeah, we hope to discuss with you further when we have the panel talk. And yeah, maybe then it's also the time for questions, or do you think? Yeah. Later. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
I could be the panel myself, to be honest. Like I could ask like so many questions, and also in some cases also add reflections of those contested territories and on the consequences on the real life of people, for instance, especially in the relation to technology. In some cases you talked about invităm, which is a curious space, but also, for instance, in Kosovo, there were in Mitrovica, I remember that they lived there. Mitrovica is this part, the southern part of northern Kosovo, let's say. And curiously, around 2016, 2017, it became the European hub of Bitcoin mining. And why it happened, for instance, it was because I later started a project that ended up in a documentary. It was called Trust in the Blockchain Society. So we were researching several of these things. And the curious aspect was that we found out that why it happened was because the people of Mitrovica, they weren't simply paying for the electricity bills. Because they weren't, like, of course, it takes so much electricity to do Bitcoin mining. Now it's almost impossible, for privates at least. And the curious aspect was that in their case, they weren't recognizing the authorities. So they were like, fuck that, we're not going to pay. And they turned into the commodification of this advantage. Anyway, let's go ahead, because again, like a classic Italian can talk forever. Let's invite the next panelist, which is Theo Deutinger. Oh, yes, yes.
That's why I'm last.
No, second. Who is also and used the tools, especially of visualization and data visualization, and in order to actually inquire several aspects of their searches. Downstairs he has them, which I actually invite you to spend a long time. It is the extension of a previous project of his, which was the handbook of Titan. And specifically, exactly, this book here. Specifically talking about actually the physicality of workers.
Do we do now this live?
Simply because I think for the recording.
Okay. Yeah.
Otherwise,
Yes, thank you. I did not prepare a presentation because I thought it's a panel. But I have some images and I can make a presentation out of what I have. I want to thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. And I also was very happy to get invited. It's a little bit. I'm from Austria, from Salzburg, and which is to the west of Vienna, and I'm teaching in Vienna. And I go there by train, and I don't know if you have this feeling, but I'm sitting in this train, railjet, with the destination Budapest. And I always have to get out in Vienna. And I don't know if you have that, but this is this urge to just don't get out. To just stay there and go to Budapest. I never did. I always went out to wait for my students. But on Wednesday I did it, because I anyway had to go. But it was this feeling passing by Vienna and going to Budapest and even further. So it was very, very liberating and very exciting for me. This is the train station of Budapest, because I had to wait 2 hours, I missed the train and so. But what I like here is this gate. So with airplanes, you have to go into the gate. But here you see really a gate. The train to the outside. So the trains enter this train, enter the gate, and then you go out of the gate. It's I find it still very beautiful. This literal, leaving a city by going through this gate or entering a city. And yes, I came by train, and what I was longing for is exactly that. I was hoping exactly to see that, and it looked exactly as I imagined it, this flatness, a lot of fields and emptiness, or at least emptiness in terms of buildings, fullness in terms of landscape and agriculture. And I really enjoyed going here, the travel. And arriving in Deveshwar, which we investigated for the exhibition. I don't know if you know the exhibition, I will show some images at the end. You can also be said we could go down, but we're quite a lot of people, so maybe we go afterwards. Exactly. The presentation is actually a little bit turned around, but I will manage. The project, which is in the basement, is, and I was invited also because of that, is in this book. This book has 12 chapters. It was published in 2017, and it's a book about designs which are against people. Actually, it's a book which is a collection of things architects should probably not design. And it's weird, we don't have a code as architects, not like the doctors have I think the quote of Hippocrates, I think it's called, where they say we will only act in the good of people. Architects don't have that. We can do whatever we want. We can design prisons. Probably even concentration camps are designed by architects. But also walls and fences are designed by architects and engineers. So it's part of our profession to, I don't know who of us does it, but probably one of us is it, and we were educated in universities. And somehow people ended up designing walls and fences. The book is, I'm very happy to say that the book is it's going well, let's say, the people like to buy it. So the publisher asked us to make an update. It will be republished now in November. And for the update, we looked at this chapter 2, which is about walls and fences again, and see what happened in the last 5 years since 2007. In this book, there are about, I think, 66 or 67 walls which separate nation states. And this is already the updated world map. Now we have in the new version 116. So in the last 5 years, about almost I don't know what it is, 55 new wall typologies were added. So just in 5 years, the amount kind of added 30% were built in the last 5 years. So there is an enormous wall building hype around the world, and which is ever accelerating. I just want to zoom in on one example, which is the wall, which is not so much talked about. It's the wall between Turkey and Syria. Turkey is the longest continuous wall on the planet in terms of a single element. There is you see here these prefab concrete slabs. The border between Turkey and Syria is completely sealed off. So it's about 900 kilometers of walls, and it will be continued between Turkey and Iran with another 300 kilometers. So in total there will be 1,200 kilometers of walls of the same typology, of the same slab. It's also interesting that there is a kind of, you could say ornamentic, but also an imprint in the wall. I just imagine, you will see later that this wall story is a story which is not very new, but it's interesting to think about archaeologists who will find these walls in 2,000 years. Turkey is not existing anymore, but you find this almost like coins, which period it came from. This wall is very, it's not just a wall, it's a fortification system. So you have cars, you have drones, of course light and sensors. It's almost comparable to a medieval wall. Here you see a map. What is interesting, the wall between the US and Mexico is interesting because it closes off an entire continent, or it cuts an entire continent in half, which is very, very radical. But with Turkey, it's interesting that the whole country is almost carving itself out from the rest. What I forgot to say is actually here that the EU is one of the most active wall building. The EU countries, also because of the recent war, is one of the most active areas of wall building in the last 5 years. Yes, this is here's this new part of wall construction between Iran and Turkey. And you see that Turkey is actually almost as Israel is already almost cut off from the outside. So what we did for this exhibition is to compare it to the city of Temeswar, which was a fortified city. And the theory is that actually what Turkey does is just on a larger scale what Temeswar did, or the Habsburg Empire did at kind of 300 years ago. I mean, the technical means were not, it was not possible technologically to make a wall around the Habsburg Empire, so cities were fortified. But now we have the technology, we have the means to cut off entire countries from the rest. It was interesting to investigate how this works. I was never interested in fortifications, really, or in how they work. It was beautiful, but it is interesting that there is a whole system of flooding these zones. Here is a lock, which, because the river flows in that direction, so here is a lock which allows the water to run in, and here's a lock which kind of allows the water to run off again, and the whole system could be flooded by water in case of emergency. Yeah, it was interesting to arrive here. That's why my train journey, and then the train station is somewhere here, and I walked to my hotel, which is somewhere here. And I was walking through this map when I arrived. It was so funny because that's how I knew this by looking at the map. And then I was walking along here, and I thought, oh yeah, there was this bridge. I must be now somewhere at the bridge, and I was walking through this park, and I thought, oh yeah, I'm now at the harbor, and my hotel is somewhere here. Yeah, so I was completely orientating myself according to this map, and I never had this before. It was a strange experience to have this flashback to a time I've never experienced. And being here is also interesting to see how the city deals with these fortifications, how just cars drive through these enormous walls, once enormous walls. For our technology, this does not exist anymore. It was once a fortification which prevented the city from being taken over, but now it's just, yeah, it's a soft thing. This is also this is a picture I took here. So I was standing here and made a picture here. It looks like a car park, but the traffic light was red, so the cars are waiting. It's very funny. And I realized how proud the people are about this wall. This is a sewage lid of the sewage system. The visual is written on it, and the whole fortification system is part of it. So it is what was a wall to the outside became something you're proud of. And I never thought about it, and I thought, yeah, maybe in the future Turkey will also be proud of their concrete wall. Or so, I don't know. History always seems to be then much different than what we think. But just, yeah, it makes me now thinking different. Also, these walls or seeing these walls in the cultural way. Yes, and this is the exhibition downstairs. So we present the findings. So these 116 wall typologies. We presented little, I could say, cards, and the room is the archive of the tyrant who is sitting there and is continuously maniacally drawing these new walls. We also try to achieve completeness. So we know it's not possible, but these 160 wall typologies are all we could find. So maybe there are more, but we could not find more. So we tried to we found some walls we proposed for the first edition, but we always strive to have completeness. So we hope that our archive is complete. And here you see this connection between the temperature walls, for which we found this, we have these plans from the war archive in Vienna, because the Habsburger built the fortification. And we read through these walls. What is also nice that this installation somehow works, I think, as a piece, not only as showing information, but also as a playful piece where you can play with this being behind and in front of this wall. And then you can feel how it is to be behind bars. I have this image of you with the hands through the I could have included. It was very beautiful. Yeah, thank you also for building it. Yes, that's the story about that. It's not so much into let's say the depth. There's much more information in the exhibition. But yes, these are my thoughts. In the book about the amount of the amount of nation states, we also have here, for example, the book. The first chapter is about the size of the world for passport owners. So if you have here, if you have this is a Brazil passport, these are all the countries you can visit without a visa application. You just can go and visa on, like the visas in the airplane. And we did this for all countries in the world. Getting less and less. And this is, for example, if you own an Afghan passport, you can only visit 24, I think, what was it? 22 countries. None of the countries are neighboring Afghanistan, so you are somehow landlocked. And this is just an idea we had as humans. We had the idea, let's make a passport. That was 1920, was the International Passport Conference. It was a result of the First World War, but people still thought at that time it's a very strange idea. The British were complaining about the picture. They said this is an infringement of their privacy. There should be no picture in the passport. And they refused to take a photography and so on. But now it's a document that decides about life's action. And here we have 203 countries. And our definition, you can make your own definitions. We made our own definition of what is a country. We said it's all members of the United Nations, plus all countries which are recognized at least by one member of the United Nations. So doing that, we came up to 203. It allows us to include Taiwan, to just offend a little bit the Chinese. And no, but this definition allowed us to include Taiwan, which was, I think, important to us, and Hong Kong at that time. Yeah. So it is very interesting how you define that. Yeah, just to go. I think we have some time. Yeah. There were other, similar to your. These are not micronations, but these are terrorist groups. And we included all which had their own flag. What is interesting about terrorist groups, they are a very violent political opposition, you could say. But it's interesting that they have the urge to present them with a flag. So there is an intrinsic inner need to represent themselves to the outside. And we analyzed what is used on these flags, like animals, weapons, books, and so on. So it's that, and it goes to urban, to destruction and urban infrastructure, urban furniture, like the benches with where you can not sleep on, and so on. Urban protest with police techniques, prison cells, size of prison cells. Death penalty. An interesting insight is that we had to do the death penalty, I mean, also the ways how to kill a person. We had to do it in a fold-out page for the American market. Because the publisher said if you flip through it, like that you don't see it. And that's how they could sell it in America, otherwise the Americans would not accept it. Because it would be too much violence visible. So if we flip the fold-out page, that was very, very weird thinking. Slaughterhouses, these are all animals killed per second worldwide. Got much more chicken, a little bit less pig in the last 5 years. And these are all methods how, yeah. So the book is very, very rich of things we should not be proud of. Okay, thank you very much.
The question of what makes a state is a recursive question very often, and everybody, I think, everybody finds its own answer to it, also depending on what their very interests are. I think, for instance, some people, I remember one time took for a similar categorization, took the representation of the teams of FIFA. So if you have a football team that is recognized by a federation, football being probably the most sport, then okay, yes, then you are then you can be one of us. And I think it's fascinating actually to see basically to see the projection of the interest of a person or organizations that often have specific vested interest in this recognition. In any case, now I will leave the stage to Carsten and Bernard, who are architects and also trained designers, right? So their interest has always been, of course, also in the making of architecture, in the detailing of architecture. And we will see actually through their practice and their network, their practice that carry their initials, and their network that is instead called OSA, aka Office for Subversive Architecture, practice of sorry? No. That's it. So we will see actually how they've interpreted the theme of this biennial through their practice.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you very much for inviting us. We are really happy to be here in this amazing space, and already listening to the former speeches was fascinating. And there is, of course, connections, direct connections, also what we will talk about, although there's also other aspects. But what's maybe important to say is that we're here as Carsten and Bernard, that's the practice, as already said. But we, rather than looking at what we're doing on, let's say, daily basis, we're architects, we are designing spaces, houses, etc. There's something. But what was really interesting is that we had the opportunity through the inclusion in the trail to to go a bit back in time, where we did two pieces, that triggered to make a talk that really reflects on the whole journey until now, how it influences also other works, but in particular, how this definition of what also people ask us all the time, what is this office for subversive architecture? Who are you? What does it stand for? What's the meaning? And that was really a great opportunity, thank you for that, to actually collect these thoughts and to come up with a talk.
Yeah, basically, it's a
we need this, or is it okay with
I'm allergic against microphone. I think I can hear me all.
Yeah,
is it okay like this?
It's all recording. Yeah, I mean, what you can see, we are not escaping architecture like you did. So we do architecture. Our studio is based in London and in Berlin, and we do all sorts of things. I mean, we do the classical architecture, but we do also, of course, the installations, how we started as well in university. So with our studio, with our practice KHPT, we do a whole range, but the Office for Subversive Architecture, the network exists. We are 8 people overall, and we are a bit more experimenting in space.
Yeah. One could say that it's a vice versa influencing, so the experimental network is really feeding into the practice. But what's really interesting is that the network formed already when we were studying. As Bernd said, 8 people. Now, I think, across 4 or 5 countries. And when we started, it was like loose formations within study. So we were just doing group work, even though actually back then it wasn't allowed. We were only allowed to do individual work from professors, but we teamed up and did projects together and then formed the group. And now reflecting on it, what it really meant for us was that the subversive thought was that we would like to push out of the university context to realize projects. There also the making came into the fact that we were joiners and also into crafting and making things. But mostly that we were getting interested in supporting the common views, what architecture could be, what we were at the university. Whilst we were interested in the topics, there were other things out there. And that were also the areas, overlooked, abandoned areas, like people talking about space that is neglected and an eyesore, people were like not liking it. That was the space we were actually getting to be interested in. And then looking at how to destigmatize those spaces, to actually see value and potential in it. And we're talking, this was 1996, when we started forming the group. And then, of course, when doing these projects, to also make them ourselves, self-initiated. Obviously, there was maybe no budgets. We were basically getting our materials ourselves and then starting to do these projects and also looking at the interdisciplinary aspects. So already thinking about getting other disciplines, in particular artist views. We were also assistants to an artist in Frankfurt, where we did installations. So all this kind of layering came in, which then led to our first project, which we did actually, I think it was 7 who were involved in this one.
So yeah, we do have a kind of summary that we have a couple of projects we show you. The one, I mean, we start with the beginning in a way. That's one of the first projects Osa has done. That was out of university, so we decided let's show that because it might be quite interesting how we started. That we pushed out of university, but then we have 2 guerrilla, so-called guerrilla projects. These are the projects which are shown as well as a replica in the biennial. Then we said we show you a project with the reprogramming of public space. What Carsten said, the destigmatization, and at the end, if we have time, we have an additional classic, in a way, public art project, but we believe it's also in the spirit how we, in general, how we work. So the first project, what we said is one we've done all 7 or 8 together. It was a former subway, typical 60s town planning. Cars are more important on the street, people get pushed down, need to walk underneath, and it was quite derelict and run down, and there were a couple of these boxes inside. And these boxes were display cases for companies or shops around. They could use it for displaying their things. And we thought, why not using this space and making it to a public space again, which is adorable, but also plays probably with things like our current living situation. Flats are important. How do we live in the city in general? Do we all need bathrooms, kitchens, bedrooms, all these things? So we decided these boxes, they could be rooms. They could be rooms you can sit in, and they have these have a bit of a weird scale, but in a way you can see these are the boxes how they looked before, and that's how we started as join us as well, working on these things. So we were fitting out bathrooms. We did a living room, whatever living room needs. Living room is a TV room, I would rather say, than a living room. So we installed a TV in the lounge and a working space. So all these boxes became typical rooms. And at the end, of course, we had a storage, we played with these typical street signs. We said, okay, now it's not only the subway, but it's the entrance door to our apartment. So we converted the things which are around, we used them and we converted them, that they were somehow playing in our space. We had a letterbox on the outside. I didn't find really letters in there, but which was quite nice. And also we installed a doormat when you came in, and really people walked through and suddenly they brushed their shoes off. And so it really, with these kind of little things, little details, you really change the place. We also had a housewarming party, which was quite nice. So we invited a lot of people, and we put in the newspaper, we put we announced it. We said 3-bedroom flats to be rent, and people really called us up and said we are interested. And I think we had only 10 square meter overall, but with a huge corridor. But people were interested.
Yeah, what's really interesting about it was this in-between scale as well, because you actually could live in there, you could sleep in there. We were actually lounging around there for a while. We had also some kind of events where we invited the public as well, and it got us really interested to do more in the direction of these spaces that are doomed in the sense of the public to actually see the potential. And what was also interesting is that when you deal with those spaces, and I'm sure all of you who were involved in this project here, you get to really like those spaces. You actually get comfortable and home with them. And that was for us really important. That what you pass by, you've forgotten about that, you think things or whatever, it's awkward, and you work on it, you change bit by bit, subtle things, and you suddenly get attached to it. And that was something that got us interested in this project. 2 years later, almost 7-8 years later or so, when both Bernd and myself went after the studies, after we graduated to London. We worked in the practice there as architects, but we never stopped thinking about carrying on doing what we were really loving, which was this kind of looking at the other places. And we passed by this signal box in Shoreditch, off Brick Lane. Back then, quite on, I would say it was literally on the fringe of where gentrification started, and one of the poorest area in Tower Hamlets was bordering with some really rough housing. And there it was. this kind of unreachable house on stilts, and we were really intrigued because immediately we thought this is screaming for treatment. Like we have to do something with it, and then we said, okay, let's create something that is, in a way, a sign of what's happening here, with the kind of development of the city, this kind of the border between development and poverty, so to speak. But also to create something that is really nice and appealing, and it's the kind of a dream house that everybody in England is striving for, the kind of cottage that you see in the countryside, but also the links to West London houses that are really pristine, with white paint and the doorknob in bronze, etc. So we said, okay, let's create a piece here. Initially, we will show a film about this, where you will also hear about. We actually didn't get permission because we asked, because it wasn't about to do it undercover or forbidden. We were just interested in realizing. But then we said, no, we are not giving up on this idea. We go there. And in the night, I would say it was around 3 o'clock at night, we started going there, a team of 5. With all the gear, all the tools, materials, and then we had roughly 10-hour makeover of the signal box into this dream house, into this cottage.
So basically, as soon as you look official, I mean that's what we realized, and it's a hint for you. As soon as you look official, like properly geared up, no one will ask questions when you do. So basically, that's what we did. I mean, we proper had our helmets on, and I mean, not in that picture, but we do. And we finished that house in this kind of 10 hours. And there were even people from the railway, because it was part of transport for London. There were even people from the railway passing by, and they didn't ask any questions. So we did these kind of nice things with this ironic, what Carsten said, West London style. Images, these kind of geraniums in front at the windows, and then the lawn in front with a nice deck chair, and painted it white. We had a black door and a bronze doorknob, which you can't see. But of course, it was stuck to this kind of unreachable house, unreachable for the people in East London, and that was in a way the intention. It's kind of showing the border between West London and East London, and the whole gentrification process.
We did install a light that was only switching on after 7 o'clock when it went dark, when it got dark. And that was quite interesting. I think I just learned earlier you did this here as well, because this is one of the replicas in the trade. And there was quite a bit of interaction with people around, which we followed when we were coming back. So it was quite interesting how people were actually dealing with it. They were quite freaking out. They thought some ghosts moved in, and the kids were like screaming when we were close there, and they were throwing things at the house. So it was really triggering some strong feelings towards it. But yeah, I did a documentary about this because there was a filmmaker coming in to ask us to go back to do something.
These are members of the Office for Subversive Architecture. Their mission, to improve derelict buildings and draw attention to forgotten places.
This is actually not the first time we are doing intervention with space. It's actually the third time, and it kicked off with the refurbishment of this old signal box. And what we had in our mind is to create this kind of dream house image while in production. And what happened is we found it destroyed after a few days. This is a response of the destruction.
The press called us guerrilla architects, and guerrilla is a Spanish word, and it means a gang war. It comes from the war, basically, and it means it's something destructive. we're not very happy with that because we are constructive, we are not destructive. It's more about environment and changing spaces by using good, nice images and trying to get to emotionalize, to get people feeling about space as well.
Very often we're dealing with space, which is public space, which is urban space, and very often it is neglected or abandoned space. So what we always try is to improve the space and to change it as well. Sometimes temporary, sometimes permanent.
I think it's brilliant. It's like something out of another world, mate. Just such a shame. I see the roof come down. I think it's just such a shame. Just that somebody should have it and look after it. And I think it's absolutely brilliant. Just don't see that sort of things nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows the spirit of not destroying, even if there's something that might be had a negative impact also, but to always come back, to redo, to look at it, to have a look at the positive sides of even the destruction that happened. And it is a nice kind of transition to the next project, where it was in a similar way the consideration of how to create a piece that is intrusive on a certain level but not destructive. And that was a few years later, also in East London, where actually Blueprint magazine, they came to us and asked if we could team up with them to collaborate on a project that deals with the 12-kilometer long blue fence that was surrounding the construction area for the London Olympics for 2012. What the Blueprint magazine did for one of their monthly magazines, they wanted to do a comparison of Beijing 2008 and what's happening in London already. And they didn't get any information from the ODA, the Olympic Development Agency, because they were very secretive. I don't know if you heard about that. It was, the whole process was really quite undercover. How these developments went, also in terms of financial, it was always quite monitored. So what happened suddenly, almost overnight, this fence came into the neighborhood and was literally excluding the people around, also people living there, and the actual construction site. And Blueprint wanted to do this article also to actually instill a bit of a positive spirit. It wasn't necessarily to be negative about the Olympics, it was actually the opposite, to also show what could be done in terms of like inclusion for the public and for the people around, but no information given. So nobody can look over the fence. The fence was always the same blue of the surrounding. It was always painted freshly, a tag or graffiti immediately. 15 minutes later, the guys came and painted it over. So the question was, how can we deal with this situation? And we were really, of course, really thinking of drilling a hole or cutting things off, getting access to it in a more violent way. And then we said, no, we need to deal with what's there, again, the potential, and also use the same methods and also the design methodology in terms of color, paint, and also the scale.
It was relatively difficult to find out the color code. They even kept this secret. But funnily, we knew somebody in the city who told us what the color code is. So we we got the exact color, like the fence, because as Carsten said, as soon there was something on the fence, there were guards walking around every half an hour. As soon they found something, they were painting it over. So basically what we did, because we found out the exact color code, we said, okay, then we add something. We add something which looks like the fence, and we added this little stair, this little platform. And we called it point of view. Of course, as with a double meaning of point of view. So what do you think about what's happening here? But at the same time, it was the first viewing platform for the Olympic sign in London. And it wasn't been seen for 3 days. So it stayed there for 3 days. Guards all passed by, but they really didn't see it in the street.
Yes, when you looked over it, you saw the site of where the Olympic Stadium is now. So that was how it looked 2008. It was interesting. It's so the whole part. There's actually some really good parts. This is the thing why it was so astonishing. Actually, some of the concepts of the revitalization of Islam were very good. Not everything, but some people were pushed out. But in general, it works still. There's a lot of people going there. So that was the strange thing. Why keeping it undercover and creating a bit of spirit, include the people, and also actually make them part of the whole journey. But also, what was interesting is that this minimal intervention sometimes has a real impact, even though, I mean, no material, hardly any material used, it's a real budget for it, but it doesn't matter, it really creates some moment. And what was interesting for us is also to reflect a bit on what is this kind of method when we're pushing these kind of initiatives where we have self-directed projects, and they are, of course, always against obstacles like these two projects were. We did this also, by the way, at night, because it wasn't allowed to build anything against defense. So that was something for us really important, and to kind of keep that also, I would say, even in our daily life projects, when we look for clients, we always have this, I would say, moment of where we try to push the boundaries, to go all the way to not necessarily be compliant with what's commonly seen as this. You have to do this. Even roof detailing, sometimes you have these discussions because of the D norm that says you have to do 150 mil upstand or so. You can make things different if you have the willpower. And I think we learned this from this kind of projects as well.
Yeah, and the manifesto, we were asked as well to write something about our method and one point. So the manifesto in a way reflects what Carsten just said, that in the normal bidding process, things can get weakened and blurred so quickly because you have so many parties involved. So, and how different it is if you push your ideas through and probably make it happen. Because you think that's the right thing and the right response towards there. So that was quite important for us to see. Of course, not always it works, and you need to do compromises because there are more people there, but you're trying to find out what is the right answer to it. And the answer often is not based on regulations. The regulations are there probably to help you in certain ways, but often it's an obstacle, and you need to try to read between the lines and find the right answer. So that one project with a read program, that's a bit in a way also reading between the lines. How we are all programmed is. So you can see on the center there is this kind of big car park space. The car park space belongs to the fair, and the fair in Cologne, and the fair pushes further east at the moment. They need more spaces, and they are demolishing more and more buildings. And the building at the back is the Kunstwerk Cologne. So they are artists living in there, work and live in there. And they have asked us if we can come up with a sign to say, fair, please stop here, because that's where we are now. So when we went there at that day we said basically that all these kind of elements which are there, what you can see on the street, or how the car park is, it can be also read as a graphic and not necessarily, what I said before, we all programmed, not necessarily something as a car park. Or here in the front you can see this island, it can be also a rocket. If you take it out of the context of the street, you can read the graphics different. So we said, okay, why not using this graphic which is there and just painting the wall in the back with this graphic. So what we basically did, we folded up the car park on the wall to say, now you can push further up, but you cannot push further to the east. You cannot demolish this building, but you can go up if you want. And then, of course, the details are quite important. You can see the little street sign on our wall. Also, it's the parking place now for the artists. And I think, yeah. So you have the press parking place in the front from the fair, and now in the back we have the artist car park space. And it's the only one which is illuminated even by night. And funnily, we also provided now 32 car park spaces. And the people can live in the Kunstwerk now, because you need to provide car park space when you have living spaces somewhere. Before they haven't had any car park space, now they have car park space, so they are allowed to live. And no one says in the regulation that you cannot park your car vertically. And it became permanent, and it's one of the most interesting spaces in Cologne.
Another project that is dealing with this reprogramming also the perception how we see our cities and daily life in Volkswagen in Berlin, which asked us to create a piece for the theater free time in summer, like August. And it's quite simple. I mean, we called it a free entry. So, because I mean, there's nothing happening, but the doors are open so you can go in for free. So basically, for the duration of this time, we installed more columns. Gradually, these normally being the entrance doors got filled with these columns. They look exactly the same. They were made by these stage designers from the actual theater. And in the end, that's how it looked. And what is really interesting about it, not only free entry, but also nobody really realized. We know quite a few Berliners who never saw this, because they thought this is how it always is. And this is quite interesting, that you sometimes add in a little detail, and actually we are programmed to see things on the daily, to walk past and it's like normal. And then you might think, oh, this is a bit different, but you would actually really have to think twice or properly to understand, this is actually a different situation. And then, of course, you go closer and you can't even go in anymore. But it was really interesting how this detail again, you kind of change this perspective, but people sometimes don't even realize. So another summary of what is really important for us is this subversive quality of play, where these rules are constantly bent and newly defined. And I think this really also this links very well to this event, of course, that this displacement also, like in most games, creates this really kind of specific fragmented new situation, and that's what we really enjoy generally with all kind of projects. And this kind of transgressive strategy or subversive strategy is of course very subtle sometimes. Sometimes it's also quite drastic, in terms of when we talk law and order or jumping the fence, then it's this sensation, and the film guy came and wanted to do this for Channel 4. But I think, or we always say, is what's even more important is that it happens on this conceptual level, this kind of thinking differently. And that leads us to another category, which sometimes is actually, of course, blurry. You can use them for some of the projects twice, but what is really important for us is also this destigmatization of a space, or also often in this instance, a car park in Mannheim, which is still currently under development in phase 2. We are showing phase 1. It's the former American barracks, which was the big settlement outside America after the Second World War. It's like 40,000 American troops were living in Mannheim. And that is the car park where all these entertainment venues are around. So like basketball hall, cinema, etc. So this becomes now a new home for 10,000 people with new developments and housing. And we were asked to create a public space literally on this car park. And it was a competition, and for the competition we thought, it's a bit of a link also to the other projects, in particular the Cologne one. We see this car park with the graphics and the tarmac. And this is really something we see often stigmatized as negative. It's like cars and car park and all this is getting hot at summer because of the nature of the material. So for this competition we created this collage, which deals exactly with the element that's already there, which is the tarmac, the asphalt. And by reorganizing it, cutting out certain graphical elements and reorder it and also set it in different heights, we were creating different functions. For example, one of these car parks, you can see one of the graphics were, if you go back to you see that the basketball court is actually part of this 6.25 meter line, which is already drawn, so we could build that. Here you see the stage. We have cut out these pieces of tarmac and then lifted them literally, and this was a lot of testing and experimenting. You saw that with the crane that we had to do tests, is it actually working? But we literally did this, so we only used the existing tarmac for this. This place in the arrow turning it around, so we created a new entrance into this public space. Here you see this is the finished stage 1. The tower was already there. It was one of the observation towers from the Americans. And we installed some beams on top. This whole area is now, there was a parallel narrative called Area 51, because we actually thought that actually this is the area 51 where the aliens were seen. It's not actually in America. And these are plates that were moving when the actual caretaker pressed the button in the basement. And so we also created this narrative around this whole project that created a new identity. It's still under construction, so there will be more parts and elements. And then we also connected it to this building, which will be for 10 years the new Mannheim Theatre. So the stage will then also be part of the play we're going to do for the opening. But it shows again like this kind of taking a material out of the meaning what it was really important for us. And also that actually asphalt has also a positive meaning when thinking about what American culture and learning broad, skateboard, skating, that all has to do also with this kind of material. And then another project, which is very much in line with that, it is an abandoned house in town, which is part of the town, coal mining town in Bergkamen, outside Dortmund, which we were invited to create an urban light piece. What does that have to do with light? We were intrigued by this tower. We said, let's deal with that. This is abandoned and nobody likes it. We really need to treat this, or we need to do something with it. We actually also told them to maybe not knock it down, because that was the conclude they wanted to demolish it. So the whole question was, how can we either create a kind of fitting farewell to the whole story of this tower that was built in the 70s, or can we even trigger some kind of thoughts to keep it and maybe do something different in the future? So the question was, how can we, this is empty since 20 years or so, and nobody likes it. It looks really quite rough inside, so we had access, and then we thought, okay, let's neutralize this space, let's paint it, paint the whole tower black, literally, to create this kind of canvas economy, so it totally disappears, to then project what would have been the inside of this, the whole story, the lifetime when it was basically filled with life and people were living in there, as a kind of laser projection, like an anamorphosis from one point. And we're going to show a little about this.
Yeah, I think because we're running over time already at 35 minutes, so I think that's the last thing we do. We show you now the film, and then yes.
Der Kabel wird aus dem Wohnturm bald ein Leuchtturm. Eigentlich sollte der Wohnturm mal als Wahrzeichen der Stadt gelten, inzwischen aber steht das 20-stöckige Hochhaus seit 13 Jahren leer.
Die meisten Menschen in dieser Stadt und ich glaube auch in der gesamten Umgebung empfinden ihn als belastend, als störend, angsteinflößend direkt.
Mit großem Aufwand wird der Turm als Kunstaktion zunächst schwarz angestrichen, damit er nachts unsichtbar wird.
Ich meine, in 76 da eingezogen. Da war es sehr schön. Also ich würde jederzeit wieder einziehen, wie es damals war. Wir hatten alles, was wir brauchen. Das war eine richtige kleine Stadt. Und es war ein sauberes Haus. Ich sag mir aber, es war Müllschlucker, es war Putzfrauen, es war also wirklich Komfort.
Dadurch, dass der Turm schwarz ist und somit bei Nacht total verschwindet, war es dann der Ansatz mit der Laserprojektion, das Innere des Turmes preiszugeben, also die Struktur, die architektonische Aufteilung und gleichzeitig aber eben Geschichten und die Geschichte des Turmes über ein Hörstück zu erzählen.
Thank you very much.
We are already running out of time, but I think actually we can extend our conversation even longer than the 10 minutes that in theory we have. I would want to actually invite the panelists, if we can rearrange a little bit the space so that it can be a little bit more of a conversation, because I think actually for everybody that attended, I think you realize that you have in front of you three completely different ways to deal with the topic. And one that is a way like practically a conventional way, and instead of a comparison. Why do we do that? I think actually, say, probably short stories, but we are rearranging our room. You can even come closer. And I also want to invite also Jorie Horsthuis, who is the artistic director of the Museo dell'Arte dell'Altrove in Rome, which literally means Museum of the Other and the Elsewhere in Rome, set in a dismissed slaughterhouse, which is an incredibly fascinating experience of urban activism, I would say. But I wanted to say, basically, leading to the very first question I wanted to ask. One aspect that you brought, that you de facto brought in your presentation, made me think of, I think, when was it, 3-4 years ago in the biennial in Venice, that was titled Free Space. I was quite fascinated by the aspect of actually space, like outer space, which was completely not there, and especially in relation to the explosive market that was being, in those years, developed. And I remember that there was the story of a guy in '67 when the first outer space treaty was signed and ratified by some nations. That this treaty was saying literally, you cannot. There's going to be a long introduction today to the question, but there is a question. The literally one word. But the treaty was saying that no sovereign nation can basically claim ownership on celestial bodies. Now, the interesting aspect was that in this law, of course, you're saying sovereign nation. I would say, like, oh, fine, rock and roll. But of course, the American businessmen thought, okay, they're talking about nations, I'm a private citizen. So basically, this guy in the US waited for the moon to pass on top of his property, and the ownership of the thing in his state were extending vertically on top of his property. Everything that is there is his. He waited for the moon to pass on top of his property, and he said, mine. And he went and he started actually selling, for decades, he was selling plots of the moon and to people that still have these lunar deeds that say, like, okay, you have a parcel of land on the moon, you're the rightful owner. I could talk about also a previous guy that said that found while moving house in Germany, that found that somebody of his ancestors were apparently given by a prince ownership of the moon, so he sued the American guy, saying, like, you're selling something that is mine. Now, whatever, that's just anecdotal, but an interesting aspect is actually understanding sovereignty that sometimes micronations claim, and of course the commodification of this sovereignty, like many nations do. We saw, for instance, in this relation with space law and space market, Luxembourg literally providing entrance for asteroid mining, for instance, providing entrance through their sovereignty in the European Union to a European market, which is a thing which is much more interesting and diversified than, for instance, if somebody wanted it to be in the US. Now, the relation between sovereignty and the commodification of this sovereignty, how have you seen it being interpreted in your research in micronations? And to a certain extent also for curators, this is a question, like how did other architects, the moment they were given the task to create a micronation, did they commodify it in any way?
I know you can buy deeds and like you can buy titles from certain micronations. So they try to sell off their sort of status. I think that for a number of historical micronations, stamps were actually a way to liquidize their assets. You know, that would make them to sell them. But nowadays, who uses stamps? So it's purely an act of collecting. So I don't think they do that anymore. I do think we discussed Libanons briefly, And they offer citizenship for bitcoins, so you can become a virtual citizen. And there's many aspects that go with this, because they also offer citizenship to refugees. So people from Syria were really interested in this citizenship, even though they knew it meant nothing, but still as a symbolic act. That's one of the aspects. And maybe not a micronation, but of course Malta had a passport affair, which they would sell passports, the golden passports. It's a very direct, real world relation, how they would sell their, the passport that was also discussed. So there's a lot of ways and a lot of angles to look at this, I would say. Not simply one answer.
Yeah, sorry. I mean that is working. Yeah. Okay. That's just a technological or a legal issue with micronations or any nation in the sea is the exclusive economic zone, which is extending, I think, 370 kilometers out of the shore, which allows every country to harvest whatever is there. So the problem with microbes like sealand is that they would, if they would be recognized, would have legally also this exclusive economic zone, which has the size of France. So if you own a rock somewhere in the ocean, you own the size of France to be in terms of resources, oil, gold, whatever is on the seabed. And that's a big issue in terms of, let's say, the Chinese Sea, where they fight about a little island where nobody lives on, but it's not this little island, it's the exclusive economic zone, which is enormous. That's why France doesn't give up its little islands in the Pacific and so on, because it's all these, I just wanted to say that. And that's why it's legally very difficult to found your own nation, especially if it's surrounded by an ocean. Landlocked is much more easy, like Andorra or so, because it stops when the border stops. But if you are to the ocean, and countries try to, but countries try to shift this exclusive economic zone even further. So now there's the fight about the North Pole, which is claimed by Russia, the US, and several other countries.
It's currently claimed.
It's only claimed.
So there are no defined borders.
No. But Russia, I don't know if you remember, I had this submarine sticking the Russian flag under the North Pole with a robot arm. It was the kind of the counter action that the Americans had the flag on the moon, the Russians under the North Pole.
Yeah. And it's also because climate change is happening, so they know water is melting there, so that it would be a passage. Yeah. That's what has to do with it. So it turns from land into sea, which is quite interesting again.
I'm always asking, I will always be asking for you to ask questions. If any hand goes up whenever you can an eye on it, I think you should really take this opportunity, given the expertise that is here. I think actually one very curious aspect, for instance, of your presentation was that many of your the interventions that you presented highlighted one of the really highlighted the unfortunate nature of loopholes, which is the fact that most of the times they can only be exploited for creativity once, and then somebody else will most likely exploit it for profit. So you, to a certain extent, when you were showing actually these 10 square meters place where you were lingering and enjoying yourself, you might have been you might have become, if you decide any time to sell out, you might have become like really the darlings of real estate moguls. So my question is, have you ever been used as a proof of concept? Like, have your interventions ever been used to prove a concept in the market? Be like, okay, look, it works.
In general, we've done quite a lot of temporary installations. And the temporary installations we see them as a starting point for something new happening there. And it doesn't mean that particular our work is reflecting what should go there, but it's more like an accelerator, that things are happening. So there are other people, other inhabitants, probably they are even closer living and even using the space more. That they started, because we've done some work, that they started doing also things there. As I said, not particular what we've done, but it's like a starting point. And that's how we see quite often our installation, our temporary installations. In terms of being the proof or having proof, not for a big estate, but for smaller things. As we said, we didn't escape architecture. So we still do it, and we're still trying to keep our spirit in these things. So there are a couple of projects we've done where they've been used, or our ideas have been used as advertisement. So not really real estate, but like something which is a bit more, in terms of how it looks and how it appears. The work is a bit more of saying hello. There is something new. There is something unusual. So that's why people came to us and used the kind of concept or idea in that way of advertisement.
Also, I think it's an interesting, really good question, because we also a lot in the last few years interventions, all of them like broad title. They became quite mainstream, and in a way, like in also not so good way, I think developers are using not necessarily our specific idea, but generally ideas that came from times that are maybe like 20, 25 years ago. And how many pavilions you have these days. And that's what we were so intrigued by when you invited us, that we went back to this kind of certain works, also the other people that are included, where it was really about the nature of the work. We were just interested in that house on stilts. And it is a bit disturbing sometimes when you see, and often quality is lacking as well, when these developers know the things are to do a little intervention or this and that. But on the other hand, in England, we witnessed that for the last years, the emphasis on public space, even if it's, let's say, semi-public because some private developers own it, has been enormous, and the city got, in a way, more pleasant. And more public space has been created, and that's also because people understood that there are in-between areas that are actually of value. So we are divided in this kind of debate, but directly we were not used in this advertisement we had. After that, House on Stilts, Hogarden, the beer company, asked us to create an outdoor pub, which we did with real grass, but we said no advertisement allowed, like banners or so, and they agreed. So we made our own rules and said we don't want this to be too big.
So that was important then for us. Of course, when we do advertisement, we don't want it to blatantly advertise. We do our work. We can make it, we can work.
I want to add something.
Yeah.
As some behind the scenes facts or funny stories from the organization of the biennial. So, for example, one of the curated micronations that we wanted to produce was to replicate the Camden bench, the famous Camden bench that is also mentioned in your book and probably has become like the poster kind of object for postal architecture. And we asked some friends in London to go and 3D scan the Camden bench with the mobile phone, and we wanted to produce this 3D scan, including the bridges, which are inherently part of this process, to then build it in Shara, again in concrete, based on this 3D scan. And the organizers of Beta approached different companies asking for quotas and let's see how much it costs if it is possible. And they went to a company that said, yeah, maybe we are able to produce it, maybe we will be interested in making a sort of partnership with you, so maybe we produce it out of our own funds, but only if you agree that the molds that are necessary for recreating this Camden bench will then be reused by us. So the Camden bench, the fake Camden bench, will become part of our catalog of products. So maybe somebody else would want to buy these Camden benches from us, of course. The conversation led nowhere and it stopped there. Also, about the point of view replica that when the organizers started to get the permits and to see how it was possible to reproduce it in the location that we indicated, it's again in the vicinity of a huge lot that is fenced, and it belongs to one of the richest persons in Romania. It will be a development it's already planned, or it's in process of being started. And so the organizers, because we are doing an exhibition about loopholes, about media interventions, but under an institution which poses a hell of a lot of problems. It's not like you just go there and do it. You have to also take care not to harm let's say the institution itself, or the order of architects, not to harm the city hall, etc., etc. So the organizers go to this guy and ask, yeah, are we allowed to do this? We want to put this little stair near your fence, and since the colors of the biennial are yellow and pink, maybe we can also paint the wall and those guys said, yeah, sure. But you do it, you paint my wall, you put the stair there, but then we can have a collaboration, so maybe we can paint also something on the wall, maybe we can put a live installation or something there, in order to exactly use your work or your intervention in order to gain some profits or some attention. And so there are things that are happening that we never would have thought.
That's why I was related to what you were saying. I was thinking of the very first research I did when I joined Podium was one about actually the POPs in New York, which are privately owned public spaces. Because an interesting aspect of the Occupy movement was that Zuccotti Park actually in the list, which was one of these privately owned public spaces, in the list of things that you couldn't do, didn't have camping. So that's why actually the occupiers set all the places there. Of course, unfortunately, that first time made sure that every other privately owned public space included from that moment on this. So that's why I say like the unfortunate nature of the loophole that exposes it exposes the shortcoming of the legislation, most likely that is going to be stopped from that moment on or exploited differently from that moment on. I have a lot of things that will come to my mind. Earlier you were talking about actually the moment, that the incredible moment of putting the flag in the ocean, and here we are basically in this almost in this very official, under this very official piece of flags. There are several symbols that actually identify the belonging to a micronation. You showed some earlier with, for instance, stamps. We talked about flags, for instance, that have probably they carry a meaning of invasion, because there is this moment of planting it, that you plant it in somebody else's backyard, whether it is the moon or as we've seen, and there is also a very symbolic act wherever you've come as an invader. That we've seen uniforms, that also you mentioned the fact that at the moment you're wearing a uniform, there is a psychological mechanism that is called social compliance, that is actually often used in scams, because the moment you see a uniform, you expect the credibility. It's something that the mind tricks you into doing. I'm very curious actually of your research. All of these symbols, it can be money, and in some cases, like I remember the article Eurostate, it can be many other things, it can be a constitution, it can be a deed. Out of these, can you already imagine the type of values that micronation is projecting outwards into the world? If it is a flag, it might be something like, as we saw in the book, something like probably, saying like some sort of defense or aggression toward others. Or if it is a post, like a stamp, is it trade then? Or is it, I don't know, something like this?
Yeah, okay, yeah. I think you can even see it here. If you have a flower on your flag, you mean happy. I mean, these symbols are quite easy to detect, I think. And what I see in the stamps, and what I also see in a lot of flags or money, actually, that there's they want to imitate. They want to imitate the real, like the real world. So a lot of stamps relate back to the stamps that we know. They will have royalty, the medal. They would just, it's a type of propaganda. So they just look at what's already there and mimic that in a lot of occasions. But in here we also see quite like this hashtag stamp. I think it's very original, but it also came from a very original mind. And others, this flag of Christiania, which is with the 3 dots. I don't know what it means. I know they have this as a symbol, but I'm sure it has, it has a meaning for them. So a lot of them go back to their own history, like this Rose Islands. That's quite clear what it means. But I think as far as the stamp goes, a lot of them try to mimic the real world, the micronations. The border stamps are more dealing with propaganda. So the islands that Theo was talking about, they also make stamps in China of these little islands, where they would just show the lighthouses which they built on top of these islands, because if there's habitation, then you can claim it. So, and they simply put out a stamp again, just to mark, hey, this is ours. So the stamps can be sort of redundant as an object or as in use, but it does have a lot of symbolic function. Yeah. You want to add something?
I cannot. Actually, it's something that I want to ask, is known as interventions. Just one thing, since we are also practicing what we preach, so we also learned the value of official clothes in order not to get stopped by the people or the police and so on. There's also something else which we learned, which is obvious knowledge for who's already been involved in this unsolicited kind of fringe projects between the legality and illegality. But it's something really interesting to me. It is the choice of the perfect time at which you do things. It is obvious that night time is a very fertile moment during which these projects can be delivered. But studying and researching for the exhibition while writing the catalog, for example, I also learned that the summer is a very good period, not only because of the weather conditions, but also because institutions and offices are kind of like more lazy in the moment. There's less people controlling, there's less personnel. So for example, the Architectura Splendida project in the Banlieue of Paris, which was basically working on this ambiguous status of several devices which are furniture, but they're not furniture because if it's furniture they couldn't install them and so on. They were all done during the summer because that's when the least amount of policemen and officers will actually come and control and verify and so on and so forth. And once they're there. So it becomes somehow they transform into a de facto situation. So somehow to finding the perfect also time frame to put things into reality, and then let's see if reality itself consolidates is also something that I find extremely interesting for this sort of practices.
One other thing that I might add when talking about micronations and let's say state building, the symbols and how micronation claims to release acts or deeds or passports, even if useless, it builds our nation, but also it finances the existence of these small operations. What you see here in the niche is a collection of acts such as this, but right from the beginning we decided, okay, we don't pay nothing. Right? So there are several certificates that claim that I am a citizen of this and that micronation because they were for free. For several others, we exhibited our claims to become by filling this form that you have to also attach like you to something in order for them to release you a certificate of citizenship. And there is also for Sealand this deed that promotes me as Duke of, I don't know, Sealand or something like that, which is a fake. Because I photoshopped it, I didn't want to buy it, right? So I found online some other, and I just replaced the name and the date. And the date is, of course, the vernissage here. So it's like a fake of a fake, because, of course, Dukes of Sealand do not exist and do not represent anything.
I would say something to flags. Nothing wrong. Yeah. I mean, what we didn't talk about it, flags are very, I mean, have a lot of violence in them. Existing flags of nation states. So many have the AK-47 gun in their flag, and then also, I know from the Austrian flag, it's red, white, red. The myth is that they were in a fight, and was it Otto, one of the Austrian rulers, had a belt, and after the fight he released the belt and everything was white here, the rest was red from blood. So there was the flag, red, white. Yeah. So there's a lot of violence in the color and the symbolism of flags, unfortunately. And also, I mean, the British flag, also interesting, it's a symbol of virtues, I think. It's Wales, continent, so it's almost like a company, you know, when you have these mergers of big companies, they merge the different flags together.
But violence, when you said violence in the sense of power, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I've got
Yes, I mean the AK-47 in your flag is quite a thing. I think,
yeah. We're talking about micronations, but if I may connect it to unrecognized states, there they exactly do the same. So they give out passports and coins. And there's real people living there. They have to have this passport. So, for example, in Transnistria, they have their specific passports, but they are useless. So the people who live there, they have like a daily problem because they cannot travel, for example, with this passport. That's why I'm also very curious about your book, and because you have more states in there, like what's happening to people who live, for example, in Abkhazia. As far as I know, they cannot travel with these passports. So people who live there, they need to have like a backup plan. So the Serbs living in Kosovo, they also have a Serbian passport. Many people who live in Abkhazia, they also need a Russian passport because otherwise, they just cannot travel. And this is just one of the issues they encounter living in an unrecognized state.
And now they're really afraid that they're being mobilized, people in Abkhazia as well, because of their Russian passport. For them it's really, this is a matter of life and death.
Yeah.
Anybody? No, well, otherwise, yes, please.
Trovo molto interessante il ragionamento che la mostra, oltre a questo incontro fa, sul muro, che in qualche modo ce lo fa comprendere allo stesso tempo com'è, cioè può essere di destra o di sinistra.
So, Dr. is arguing that he finds very interesting the way in which we are making walls be understood in more complex ways, and quando ci destra e sinistra intendi politicamente.
Sì, nel senso che...
So the walls can be, like, he said, left-wing or right-wing walls. So the walls are not the same exact thing, but they have several different meanings.
Nella stanza accanto abbiamo un muro rotto, abbattuto, che vuol dire liberare lo spazio, vuol dire, no? E dall'altra parte abbiamo un intervento artistico che invece alza un muro, no?
So in the other room we have both a broken wall, a bridge wall, and also an erected wall which stops a passage, so the two existences of walls.
Sì, e in questo dibattito di oggi, in questa stanza, abbiamo un po' la stessa situazione, no? Cioè si parla di muri nel mondo che tutti consideriamo odiosi, no? E dall'altra parte però quindi stati, quindi nazioni che impediscono la libertà di movimento, il passaggio, no? E dall'altra parte festeggiamo le bandiere delle piccole identità che abbiamo, però con lo stesso linguaggio, no? Cioè si fanno nazione, usano le bandiere, usano, no? Gli stessi strumenti. Allora la domanda è
Sorry. So also in this room we are actually discussing border walls, but at the same time celebrating small identities which are visualized by means of the same tools that nations then also to borders give themselves, which is in this case flags. And so the question is...
Sì, no, diciamo che come dire, c'è il grande muro della Palestina, no, con Israele, c'è il muro del Messico, ci sono dei muri che troviamo detestabili, però poi ci diverte il muro di Asterix che difende il villaggio dall'attacco dei Romani, no? Anche Metropolis ha un suo muro che protegge la città di Metropolis dall'attacco delle ruspe, no? Quindi diciamo la domanda è inventiamo bandiere nuove perché desideriamo salvaguardare delle identità, no? Rivendicarci come differenti, però dall'altra parte mi pare che non si esca dal paradigma, cioè il paradigma è sempre quello del muro, è sempre quello della bandiera, è sempre quello del noi, no? Forse bisogna uscire da noi.
The question that George posed is quite interesting because in the end, celebrating the micro identities that are visualized through flags is actually the very same thing as celebrating balls again and again. So, but balls, we hate the Palestinian wall and we love the walls that Asterix and Obelix put around them, no? The wall of the mom that protects the mom from the municipality of Rome from the destruction of the building. So, the question is, but in the end, are we not in the same paradigm? Is there another way, rather than defining identities, to go beyond this? So it's actually quite an interesting question about the walls themselves. To go beyond the concept of walls, no?
Sì, e forse anche contro il concetto di noi, perché è l'identità del noi che crea le bandiere, no? Forse dobbiamo, come dire, arrivare a una diversità dell'io che ci permette di essere talmente diversi nello specifico che forse non serve più o serve una bandiera per ciascuno. Questa è la mia proposta.
His proposal is to go beyond the idea of us, of identities, and to reach the point at which, okay, maybe there's one flag for each one of us. So 7 billion or 8 billion of without I don't know if you put a project into this
Yeah, I just want to add something on top of that.
Yeah,
from the very first Dutch presentation, something, I mean, like I speak from the perspective of holding a European Union passport, like I assume pretty much everybody in this room actually do. And then we had this presentation about the microstates, and I really appreciate, first of all, the artistic activities, and also the registration of them. But you had something in your presentation, you had to think that if you don't get recognized from other nations, then there's a problem. And then even though I'm European, I have a connection to a university in Taiwan and one in Korea. And see from a Taiwanese perspective, I'm really sorry, that most people see it as an advantage that Thailand is not recognized as a national state. And then there's economical advantages. And also, and seen from a career perspective, it's where there was one time I was part of a discussion with a Dutch, Scottish, German curator in Seoul. And he somehow assumed that Korea would like to be a first world country. And I'm telling you, I don't know if you heard about Korea, but they're producing telephones and cars and all kinds of things. And seen from the industrial point of view, it's the advantage not to be a first world country. They are a third world country. And that's very good for the economy because then you don't have to live up to the standards of all these so-called humanistic European garbage with human rights and so on. So it's just very funny, and also so then later on you also mentioned Taiwan, and it's really like, of course there's people in Taiwan who have this idea about humanity and so on, who speak up for human rights and so on, and it's a huge problem. But at the same time, I would say that I'm connected to two countries who also see the advantages in not being part of the first world and not being part of not being recognized by other states and so on. And then it's also like, because this thing with human rights and democracy and so on, that's just a development of Christianity and so on. And actually, and I don't think that, I think that the mission of spreading Christianity to the whole world, that failed already. But one thing we managed to spread to the whole world is capitalism. So Korea is doing fine, and Taiwan is doing fine, without living up to it, without getting recognized. So which is very different. Taiwan is somehow in the list of micronations, but it's not a micronation. It's not so micro.
It's like unrecognized state. You could say it's unrecognized.
Yes.
But in the micronation, we define it more as people who claim that they're squad.
No, it's not a comment, it's more like just a perspective. Because before I started working in Asia, I thought like you know, if you take an Austrian paper or a Danish paper, then we somehow assume that they want human rights in Thailand. But I mean, some people, but from an economic perspective, you know, we do business not to get recognized. Thailand is just a Republic of China, and Korea, and I remember this discussion from some. I'm a visual artist from where they had this Scottish curator in Seoul at the Highland, and the moment this debate where he assumed that they wanted to be the first to go to Europe. I mean, it's romantic to have it's too expensive to have democracy and human rights. And it's what is that? It's just too like. And it's also and then at the same time, I'm very looking forward to the book and to the archive. I mean, it's very important to illustrate this, but just to put it into perspective.
Yeah, I have a very short reaction to the wall as historian. I think with the walls it's interesting how I see it through the research that we had times before the nation state where we had to. But the wall of our houses were defensive walls for us. And then this house wall moved to a city wall, and we created a community, and we said we make so that the house wall got detached. First it had one function, protecting us against bombs. Then there was the city wall, and with the nation state, the wall moved to the third. So now the wall is not around our cities, but around our countries, and with Schengen around Schengen. So, that's what I wanted to say. There is this progression. And if we would not have any nation states, so the nation states and the walls are very much linked to each other. And of course, it's good to criticize or rethink the idea of the nation state, because it means also criticizing and rethink the idea of walls as defensive tools.
But I just wanted to. Hi, I'm Pepe. I have this idea that came with your presentation when you were talking about this wall in Turkey, that you was asking or wondering if in the future it could be a positive symbol somehow, as the bastion is in Timișoara, because it used to be like the repressive centralized state of the Habsburg Imperium, but it's not anymore these kind of things. And I think with the flags also, you say that flags, even in big nations, have this deep meaning that is normally very violent and these kind of things. But as human beings, we work with connotations somehow. And the symbols transform themselves through very, very concrete and specific things that happen. So now the flag in Austria doesn't represent anymore blood. It represents, I don't know, first world, democracy and healthcare. I don't know, maybe, or nice landscapes in the Alps, or Tyrolese people singing. When someone see the Austrian flag, this is what they see. And you say, I don't know, there are many examples of things that change their meaning and signification. One of the examples, you talk about slaughterhouses, for instance, and one of the most dynamic in Madrid places of culture was a slaughterhouse, Madrid, for instance. So, well, if we take the symbols and walls also, when you were talking about walls, it's the same thing. I mean, the Berlin Wall was very, very negative, and we don't like it. It was a very powerful symbol of repression, and the single way to escape from this meaning was tearing it down. But other walls changed. I don't know, there are walls that are now UNESCO patrimony because they were built used by Roman. And it doesn't matter anymore if they were for the present people or local population, because the meaning was lost. So, of course, history and some gesture changed the meaning of things. And I think a little bit what you try to do in your, for instance, in the things that you propose is changing the meaning of things and trying to use symbols of, I don't know, and as architects or people that do that, I wonder if there are formulas to change the meanings of things. I mean, in a faster way than just letting history or putting positive things, because this is the key for me, that specific positive things happen, then physical things or flags or anything are charged with positive symbols, or if negative things happen, like I don't know how passport doesn't is not useful for me, at the end it will have this negative connotation. Well, so I don't know if it's a question, maybe yes, but how can we design this kind of changing the meaning of the symbols?
In general, what you said, I mean, we experience that you can change places and spaces with some kind of positive narratives, some kind of positive connotations, and people rethink about how they might use these things. I think, but I believe also with the walls, it mainly happens in all our mind. And I think these are the more important walls than physically existing walls. I remember, because I have your book, Theo, and I remember the last time we met once, in your book is this, I think in your book is this American wall, which goes, but which you see above ground, you see whatever, 6 meters high, but below ground, there's another 10 meters away.
It's between Egypt and Gaza, and it's financed by America.
Oh, right. Okay. Because I remember this image in your book, and I was so intrigued that I thought this. I mean, in a way, it reflects what I just said. It's the part which is below ground, which you don't see. It's also something. I mean, there's a reason for, but it's also something what reflects in what we have in our mind. We all have our walls in our mind, and we all are trying to whatever. Protect ourselves and our environment, whatever it is. So I think what's below ground, so what you don't see, and we don't really, in the first place, see these walls, are probably more strong and more powerful than the ones which are physically there. But I think in terms of what I said before, in terms of a positive connotation or positive way of changing spaces, you can also positively influence the people and how they deal with other things. And that's probably you might be able to take down walls. You know.
Should we extend the audience food for thought to the outside? Because the beauty is that there are a lot of points that I think every one of us wants to reflect on. Sometimes with specific people or specific things they said, definitely. So I think actually yes, it was very successful for me as to be part of a lively confrontation. And once again, this is a personal compliment to all the curators and the team, really, for putting together something so ambitious, knowing that a biennial is one of these cultural agents of change through which you actually act on nation building. I was last week in Tallinn for another biennial opening. Definitely you could understand that through the things that they selected, that was one of their goals. So they got nation building as to say, deciding the stereotypes that you will be known for in the future. So it's very fascinating for me to actually be part of these and having such a fruitful conversation as well. Good.